Richard starts by pointing out that studies of aggression often fail to separate physical aggression from verbal aggression, indirect aggression, microaggressions, let's say, relational aggression, opposition, competition, and other so-called externalizing behaviors. So maybe you could start by commenting on that, Richard, because one of the key features of your work is the specificity of your definitions, and we need to know about the reason for that.
Yes, well, when I started doing research, I was doing research on juvenile delinquency, essentially, the general problem of juvenile delinquency. I did my PhD thesis on this, and I was brought on to study physical aggression because it appeared to be a narrower type of problem, easier to study than simply juvenile delinquency. And as I worked on that problem of aggression, I realized that people were using the word aggression to mean all sorts of things. And I sort of slowly zoomed in on the physical aggression research, thinking that it would be much simpler to study. And I did that in part because I was interested in looking at the early signs of problems with physical aggression. And when you start looking at young children, very young children, you become amazed to see how frequently they physically aggress each other. And they are much less sophisticated than elementary school children or adolescents or adults. So the action is really on into physical aggression. And as we measured the physical aggression in early childhood and developmentally over time, it became very obvious that what we were all thinking, that aggression increased with age and sort of peaked in adolescence, late adolescence, we showed that physical aggression was at its peak in terms of frequency around between age 2 and age 3. We were looking at in daycare centers, and I finally discovered that the place in the world where you're most at risk of being physically aggressed is in a daycare center when you're between age 2 and age 3. The amount of physical aggressions is incredible. Of course, they are not well coordinated and they are not very strong, so the damage is not the same damage as a physical fight when you look at adolescents. But the frequency of physical aggression is clearly there. And to a certain extent, it changed my way of looking at this problem of aggression throughout development, from very early childhood until adulthood.
The problem with big tech companies is that they don't just want your money, they want to know everything about you. Shadowy data brokers make a living compiling detailed profiles of your online activity and selling those profiles to marketers and other corporate interests that want to influence you with targeted ads. They're not selling a product, they're selling you. But you don't have to let them. There's a way to keep your browsing history truly private, and I use it every day. It's an app called ExpressVPN. One of the easiest ways for data brokers to track you is through your device's unique IP address, which also reveals information about your location. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, which makes it much more difficult for data brokers to monitor, track, and monetize your private online activity. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network traffic to keep your data safe from hackers when you're on public Wi-Fi. ExpressVPN works on all your devices, phone, laptop, tablet, you name it. Just tap one button to turn it on and you're protected. It's that easy. I use ExpressVPN because I do not like the idea of some big tech company profiting off my personal data. Talk about a violation of privacy. Protect yourself at expressvpn.com/JordanYT. Use Jordan's link at expressvpn.com/JordanYT to get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/JordanYT to learn more.
Okay, so you adopted a narrow focus to begin with, and you concentrated on physical aggression. And if I remember correctly, and please do correct me, the markers were, so the even more basic markers and measurable markers were kicks, hits, bites, and steals. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So now, one of the problems that scientific researchers in the field of psychology have is that they try to investigate terms that people often use descriptively, like anxiety. But a scientific category needs to be only what it is and nothing else. And so it has to be, it's a particular kind of category. If you say anxiety to someone, you usually surround that with an explanatory framework so that the person can understand what you're talking about. So you don't have to be that precise in your use of the word anxiety. But if you're trying to measure it in a repeatable way, then you have to zero in on something that is essentially as close to one thing as you can manage and that's narrow. And you picked kicks, hits, fights, and steals. And I would say that is observable, but it also, I think, and probably not by accident, gets to the heart of what people are really concerned about when they talk about male criminality and aggression, because the biggest sociocultural and personal impact of criminal behavior, or maybe the most emotionally valent part of it, is the physical violence aspect. And that seems central. Is that fair?
Yes, it is. It's whether it's war or being physically aggressed by a neighbor, it creates more damage and it's a threat to your life.
Yeah. So it's useful to simplify it so that it could be measured and observed, but it was also a move that allowed you to get right to the heart of what was important about antisocial behavior and criminal behavior and so forth.
Exactly.
And okay. So, and then it's so easy to jump over these things, and even in your papers, because these ideas are revolutionary in a sense that isn't immediately obvious in the cautious manner in which they're couched. Because people do assume, for example, that children learn aggression. And as you pointed out, that aggression is much more common, say, among adolescent males or young adult males. But even much to your surprise, that isn't what you found. So I would like to ask you 2 questions about that. Like, why do you think you were surprised? What had you gone in there expecting? And how does this violate the assumptions that people, including scientists, generally make about aggression?
Yeah. Well, you cited Rousseau and Bandura. The research on aggression made me realize that their perspective on we are born good and it's your environment that makes you bad didn't work when you were looking at one of the worst things you call bad is physical aggression. Because we were following children from essentially birth, and the children that we were following then, they're now in their 40s, and we are still following them. We showed that between birth and adulthood, the time at which you use physical aggression against others most often is between 2 and 3. And the reason it's not at 1 or at 6 months, it's because by the time you're 2 and 3, you're much more able to aggress others in terms of you can run, you can hit, you can kick, whereas you don't see that at 6 months. But these behaviors are clearly there at the start. And as we follow the children over time up to adulthood, we saw very clearly that the frequency of physical aggression was dropping. There was less and less frequency of physical aggressions up to adulthood. So the idea that we learn from our environment to aggress doesn't fit the data at all. It's rather, with time, we learn not to physically aggress, because everybody, even those who were physically aggressing very often, with time, the frequency decreases.